Welcome back, everyone. Today I want to talk about solving quadratic equations when a equals 1. And the way we're going to solve them is by factoring. So if we have an example quadratic equation like x squared plus 11x plus 10 equals 0, I want to solve this equation by factoring. So I want to factor the trinomial into two binomials. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to look at the 10, and I'm going to say, what two numbers multiply to equal 10? Well, I know that I have 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. And then I'm going to look at the 11 and say, well, which one of those two pairs of numbers add to 11? Well, it's pretty obvious that 1 plus 10 is equal to 11. So the two numbers that are going to go in my binomials are 1 and 10. So I have x plus 1 and x plus 10. Now you could flip those around, it wouldn't matter. You could put the 10 first and the 1 second. But we really want to solve this. So what we want to do is we want to make the left-hand side equal to 0. So in order to do that, we just need to make each binomial 0. So in the first binomial, all I have to plug in is x equals -1 to make that binomial 0. And in the second one, I just need to plug in x is equal to -10 to make that 0. So the solution to my quadratic equation is x equals -1 or -10. Let's look at another example where we're solving a quadratic equation by factoring. Let's say we have x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at the -10 in this case and list the factors of -10. Well, this one we're going to have a few more because it's negative. -1 times 10, -10 times 1, -2 times 5, and -5 times 2. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at the -3 and say, well, which pair from the list is equal to -3? Well, it's the -5 plus 2. So when we factor this one into binomials, we have x minus 5 and x plus 2 equals 0. And then the solution, I don't know if you noticed from the last problem, but the solution is just the opposite of the numbers that we put into the binomials. So in this case, we have x equals 5 and x equals -2. Let's look at one more example of factoring a quadratic equation. Let's say we have x squared minus 10x plus 16 equals 0. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at 16 and say, well, we have 1 times 16, 2 times 8, and 4 times 4. And then in this case, since it's minus 10x, we want to look at -10 and say, well, which two add to -10? Well, none of them do because they're all positive. But we need to remember that we can take two negatives and equal a positive number. So for 16, we can make each one of these numbers negative. So in that case, the -2 plus the -8 is equal to -10. So our two binomials will be x minus 2 times x minus 8 equals 0. And then again, we look at those two numbers and we take the opposite of those two numbers. So we have x equals 2 and x equals 8.